Hello, my book loving friends. Welcome to Tea Talk, where we chat about books, writing, and really anything my book loving friends want to know. A little fun to get you over the hump till Friday. Say hello in the chat and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss anything. Post any questions or thoughts you might have. My name is Dee Armstrong. Some of you may already know me. I'm a romance and suspense author. My characters and books leave a fingerprint on your heart. But I'm not only a writer. I'm a grandma, a teaholic, a gardening ninja, and I love to talk about books with my book loving friends. Snuggle in with some tea and some chocolate, and let me tell you a fable about finding success. That is the theme of this month in my newsletter and in my author tea. But here we go. Deep in the Black Oak County in Tennessee, there's a secret place where songwriters go to find success. I'm not supposed to know where it is, but I met a songwriter at a conference who told me about it. Let's call him Johnny. This place is deep in a valley surrounded by tree covered smoky mountains and rocky cliffs. If you go deep, and I'm talking soul searching deep into that valley, you will find a path across the forest floor where decades of songwriters' feet have beaten down the dirt. You'll know when you're getting close because you'll hear the call of mockingbirds and the hum of a harmonica. At the end of this path, you will find secrets to achieving the success, all the success you've dreamed of. Never one to venture far on his own, Johnny convinced a fellow songwriter, Josie, to accompany him. They drove deep into the Smokies looking for the path to success. Just as the sun's rays were painting the morning sky orange, Johnny pulled his Jeep onto the shoulder of a highway. Is this it? She yawned and stretched in the passenger seat. It's a mile up. Don't want any looky-loos following us. He grabbed his phone and joined her on the passenger side of the road. Not knowing what to expect, Johnny and Josie had taken precautions. They dressed in hiking boots and long pants with long sleeve shirts made of sturdy but breathable material. Each wore a waterproof rain jacket. Josie grabbed a backpack stuffed with her favorite fiddle, snacks, and water bottles from the trunk. She covered her blonde hair with a hat and her fair skin with sunscreen. She held the bottle out. No thanks, he chuckled. My dark skin doesn't usually burn. He stuffed a few snacks and a water bottle in the side pocket of his pants, wrapped a notebook of the songs he'd written in a Ziploc bag, and slipped it back. Wrote, written a note of the songs he'd written in a Ziploc bag and slipped it into his other side pocket. With a brand new guitar on his back, he led the way down the highway to mile marker 77. Here, the highway severed a mountain made of limestone in half. Over time, vegetation had taken root within the cracks and covered parts of the rock walls. With a quick look around, he motioned for Josie to hurry, and they sprinted towards the hill. Are you sure this is the way? Josie hadn't completely warmed up to the idea that success lay at the end of the path. Johnny pulled back the vines and exposed a dark hole big enough to crawl through. This way. No way. Anything could be in there. Success is in there. He clicked his phone light on and climbed in, guitar and all. Josie glanced over her shoulder and followed. The tunnel went on longer than he expected, twisted and turned. He came to a place where part of the tunnel had filled with dirt. What's the matter? Josie's voice shook. His heart drummed against the wall of his chest, but he wanted, no, needed to write songs that touched people's hearts. He pushed some dirt forward and pulled some dirt beneath his body until his shoulders could fit through. It's nothing. They continued. The walls around him lightened and showing cracks that if he had been aware of, he might have backed out. I see the end, thank God. He chuckled in agreement and slithered out of the hole, lost hold of his phone, and fell onto the rocks a few feet below. His shoulder took the brunt of the fall, but his phone hit hard enough to pop off the case. He dusted himself off and helped Josie out. Tan dirt covered her from head to toe. She giggled. You're a mess. Not looking so good yourself. He grabbed his phone. The screen was black and cracked. He pressed the side buttons, but nothing. Great. Looks like I need a new phone. Don't worry, I have mine. She looked up at him. Even her lashes were covered with dust. Is this what success looks like? Hold still, close your eyes. He brushed her face and eyes with his fingertips. He could write a whole album about how beautiful she looked covered in dirt. There. Maybe not success, but prettier than a frog in mud. A frog in mud? She blushed and dusted off her clothes. If that's an example of your lyrics, we'd better find success fast. Which way? He nodded towards the only path through the trees and wanted to crawl back into the hole and die a thousand deaths. Nothing sexier than a frog to a country boy. He followed, but the sight of her with her baseball cap tilted and her long ponytail askew belittled his words. They came to a place where the path forked. One path led into a rocky terrain thick with black oak trees, growing so close together that you could barely slither your body through. The other path was lined by a soft, mossy forest floor and shading sugar and red maple trees. Josie gasped and pointed. In the middle of the fork, strapped by dark vines to a black oak that's branches must have reached the clouds, was a man. He let his head lolled to the side. His Confederate gray uniform had faded to shades of white. The corporal stripes had peeled off his right arm, leaving a ghostly gray outline. Dirty and blood-dried bandages had been wrapped around his face and covered his features except for his right eye. The backs of his hands were gnarly and weathered like the oak's bark, and in his hand he clutched a harmonica. Corporal! Johnny's voice squeaked to a high G. Which way to success? The man raised his head and stared at Johnny with one brown eye. He pointed towards the rocky path, squeezed into a narrow gap by the mighty oaks. That way. Johnny nodded. He grabbed Josie's hand, keeping his body between her and the soldier, and shuffled towards the break between the trees. Josie's slender body could slip through. Holding his guitar by the neck, Johnny squeezed through the set of black oaks. Not uttering a word, they both wove their way through the trees until the path widened. Yard after yard of blackberry bush lined the path through the forest. He couldn't have been real. Josie turned and grabbed a fistful of his jacket. You saw him, right? Smelled him, too. Yeah, that was the craziest thing. Her hands shook against his chest. I'm not going back there. He covered one of her fists with his hands. Their breaths mingled. Nope, I'm not planning to either. Her soft lips parted into a bright smile. Her smile did crazy things to his heart, making it buck and twist and spin like a rodeo bull. She held up a crooked pinky. Pinky swear? Even though his older brothers couldn't see him, he hesitated. Her smile faded, and he could feel her pulling away. He grabbed her pinky with his and hung on. Pinky swear. She let out a relieved breath and turned towards the path. He swung his guitar over his shoulder and waited for his heart to steady. Clusters of pink and white flowers remained in patches over the blackberry bushes, but most of them had faded into berries of shades of red and deep, dark black. He pulled he pulled plump berries from their stems, popped them in his mouth, and offered a handful to Josie. In a comfortable silence, they munched on the berries and walked down the path. The sun hadn't quite topped the trees, but cast a glow over Josie's head and shoulders. The bushes on his right shook. They stopped and stared. The bushes shook, and a deep growl reached their ears. Johnny pressed a finger to his lips. They tracked movement by the shake of the bushes. Closer and closer, close enough that Johnny could distinguish the black hairy hump of a bear's back. Bear! Screamed Josie, ear-piercing loud. She took off running past him and back from where they came. Unable to move, Johnny watched the shaking bushes race towards him, the growls intensifying. A black bear rose up on his hind legs. The ferocity of the bear's 500-pound body put Johnny's 180 muscled frame to shame. Run! Josie grabbed his arm and tugged. Run! He was rooted to the spot, but the bear wasn't. The beast roared and showing all his fangs and clawed paws. Josie's backpack flew through the air and smacked the bear dead center of his snout. The beast growled and dropped to all fours. She grabbed his hand and pulled. Together they sprinted through the blackberry bushes. The thorns ripped holes in their pants. The bear gained speed through the bushes and closed the distance. They zigzagged. Josie fell hard on her knees. Johnny scooped her up, and they ran for the split in the trees. Their breathing labored, blood pounding in their ears. She slipped through the opening. He forgot about his guitar and couldn't fit. Half his body in the gap, Johnny struggled to pull the guitar strap over his head and break free. The rancid smell of the bear's breath filled Johnny's nostrils. Time slowed, and he turned his head. A thick paw swiped through the air, ripped his guitar off his back, and struck a broken chord of discord. Johnny slipped through the black oak's branches and didn't look back. He followed Josie. She didn't stop. She ran past the fork in the path and all the way back to the hole in the limestone mountain. Bent over, their hands on their knees, they panted. They looked back at the path, but they'd lost the bear. Maybe he ate the soldier. I doubt it. She straightened and took deep breaths. Scratches marked the smooth skin on her cheeks and chin. Her pants were ripped in 3 places. Nothing but moths and insects could stomach that old man. He did smell like mold and mothballs. Johnny laughed. Not a ha-ha laugh, but a we almost died but lived to talk about it laugh that shook his body. She joined. Her laughter stalled in her throat. She locked eyes with him, her blue eyes steady and firm, his relieved and ready to tackle life. I'm not going back. What? His gaze slivered from the hole in the path to Josie. I'm sorry, let me reread that. His gaze swiveled from the hole to the path to Josie. He couldn't blame her, but something in his gut urged him to try again. Are you sure? Surer than a frog in mud. That's pretty sure. He nodded and gave her the keys to the Jeep, except for his songbook. He emptied his side pockets. Every crumb of food and drop of water he gave to her. Come with me. She held out her hand. I can't. His heart slid into his stomach. If I'm not out by nightfall, call the state police, or animal control, or Ghostbusters. She pocketed the supplies, clicked the light on her phone, clicked the light on her phone, wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him. One of those earth-shattering, going off to war kisses that rocked him back on his heels. She handed him a water bottle, slipped away, and went through the hole. All the way back to the fork, Johnny told himself how stupid he was not to follow Josie. He glared up at the soldier. Where's your friend? The mocking twang of the tone. The mocking twang in his tone told Johnny he already knew. Johnny refused to answer. Corporal, which way to success? Again he pointed towards the narrow gap between the black oaks. That way. There's a bear that way. The soldier's cracked lips twisted. Past the bear. Yep, of course it is. Johnny slipped between the black oaks and could have sworn he heard the soldier say, The road to success is a solitary path. Solitary path, Johnny muttered. At the edge of the trees he listened for the bear. Keeping low, he stepped over his crushed guitar and made his way down the path. He found a couple of granola bars lying half-eaten on the ground, and at a break in the bushes he saw the strap of Josie's backpack. Guttural throat noises and munching sounds came from deep in the blackberry bushes. Johnny kept low and quiet until he reached the other side of the forest. The path meandered up a ravine and stopped at the rocky face of a mountain. He tipped his head back and looked up at 30 feet of sheer rock. The sun was high in the sky. Water poured over the outcropping of rocks, making them slick and slimy. Over time, the water had created crevices in the rock. A few vines had found homes in the crevices. Can't be right, Johnny assured himself. It's too dangerous. He could hear the mockingbirds. I am so close, but this can't be right. He turned around, snuck past the bear, and confronted the corporal. Corporal, pull the moth cocoons out of your ears and listen to me. The path stops at the rock face, and at a rock face that no one could climb. Frustration crawled up his spine. Which way to success? The soldier grunted. You have to take what life gives you. Again he pointed toward the narrow gap between the black oaks. That way. Past the bear and the rock face? A part of Johnny wished he was in the Jeep with Josie. Yes. Shoulders bent, Johnny retraced his steps. When he could hear the bear, he took a granola bar from the trail and tossed it into the bushes. He sprinted towards the trees, chin up, arms pumping Forrest Gump style. Out of breath from running, he reached the ravine, followed the path through the rock face, searched for a way around, and discovered that the only way to continue was straight up. With fingertip holds, he made his way up the rock. Cold mountain water poured over his head, soaking him from the top down. First his teeth chattered, then his arm shook. Tiny ledge by tiny ledge, he moved up the wall. The toe of his boot slipped, and he skidded down rock, scrambling for a hold. His right hand grabbed a vine. He hung on by one arm, twisting against the rock. The vine slipped. He looked up. Inch by inch, the roots ripped away from the rock. He reached out with his other hand for an outcropping of rocks to grab. Found one. His feet slipped and slid against the wall until one toe, then another, found purchase. Hand over hand, he climbed up the mountain. At the top, he grabbed the roots of a tree and pulled himself over. Arms and legs heavy from the exertion, he laid on his back and stared up at the clouds until his breathing leveled. The mockingbird sang a sweet song. He followed the water over a flat top mountain to a spring in the rocks. He washed his scraped and bloodied hands and set off again. The path snaked down the mountain, thickening with trees the further he descended. He burst through the trees and stopped. He teetered on the edge of a huge, gaping sinkhole full of green, frothy water. He shuffled left. The ledge gave way, and he moved back. I must have missed a turn in the path. This can't be right. He turned around and searched for a branch off the path. When he arrived at the rock face, he noticed that the vines were thicker and twisted on one side. He used the vines and the handholds in the rock to work his way down. Still, he hadn't discovered the missing branch off the path that led to success. Before he realized it, he stood before the corporal. Johnny's legs gave out and he collapsed on the ground. When all seems lost, get up and try again, the soldier suggested. You sound like a fortune cookie. Johnny sat and rubbed his hands over his face. Tell me, what did you do to be stuck here forever? I stopped trying. Before I knew it, the great oak had become a part of me, and me a part of him. Adrenaline shot through Johnny. He surged to his feet. A huge part of him no longer wanted to hear the answer to his question. They stood feet apart, over a century apart in birth, but still two men alone in the woods and facing their own fears and own thoughts. Do you have a question to ask me? Johnny licked his cracked lips. Corporal, which way to success? His voice was void of energy, void of faith, void of hope. Again, the soldier pointed towards the narrow gap between the black oaks. That way. Johnny hung his head and slipped through the trees. He didn't look or listen for the bear. He didn't care. He slipped on the way up the rock wall, smacked his forehead, and blood dripped down his face. At the top, he wiped the blood away, but it dripped into his eyes, blinding him. Only able to see out of one eye, he carefully picked his way down the mountain, cleared the trees, and stood on the edge of the water-filled sinkhole. He attempted to move right, but the bank gave way. He must climb down and go through the slimy green water. Using tree roots, he picked his way down the side of the hole. A spotted salamander came out of a crack in the dirt wall and scurried across the back of his hand. Surprised, he lost his hold and fell the last 15 feet. He landed flat on his back in the water. Feeling like he hit concrete instead of water, Johnny clawed his way to the surface. The muddy bottom and long grasses sucked him down. His lungs burning, he kicked against the grass that tangled his feet, pushed through the leaves and branches, and broke the surface. Gasping and sucking in air, he stared one-eyed into the eyes of a snapping turtle. He jerked his head to the side before the turtle took a bite out of his nose. Keeping his head above water, he swam to the other side of the sinkhole, worked his way up the side by holding onto roots. A jumble of roots gave away. He fell back, hit the water, and fought his way back to the surface. He kept thinking about Josie. Why did he leave Josie? What kind of a fool would leave a girl like Josie? Slower this time and more careful, he picked his way up and over the side. Soaking wet, covered in muddy water and green algae, he laid on the ground and stared up at the sky. The sun had started to sink behind the trees. He rolled over and felt his songbook against his leg and a water bottle against his other. He took the notebook out of his side pocket. Muddy water had found a way into the Ziploc bag. His throat felt thick. He removed the notebook, and brown water dripped from the edges. Some of the pages had stuck together, and the writing on the pages that had parted was smeared and unreadable. He pounded his fist against his thigh. He was a fool. He got up and followed the path down the mountain, across a river, over a small grassy hill, and back into a forest. The trees opened up into a forest floor covered with moss. In the distance, the hum of a harmonica and the song of mockingbirds called to him. Blood continued to drip down his face, blocking his vision. The further he went, the more familiar the path felt. Setting sunbeams made the leaves of the sugar and red maple trees glow. Johnny came to a fork in the path, and a soulful song. I'm sorry. Johnny came to a fork in the path, and the soulful song of the harmonica stopped. Once again, he stood before the soldier. Johnny had traveled full circle back to where he started. He'd lost his guitar. He'd lost his music. He'd left Josie for nothing. The two men stared at each other. Two men had searched for success. One who'd given up hope and lost everything, even his freedom. One who'd struggled and overcome, only to find himself back at the beginning of his journey. Anger exploded through Johnny. He opened his mouth to yell at the soldier, but words couldn't escape his dry throat. He broke the seal on his water bottle. The corporal licked his cracked lips. Johnny handed him the water. Thank you. The corporal downed the water in one large gulp. Johnny swallowed hard and tried again to speak. Why didn't you tell me? The soldier handed the water bottle back. Why didn't you know that success begins and ends with you? Johnny nodded and turned to leave. Every muscle in his body ached, and he wanted nothing more than to crawl back through the limestone tunnel and get back to Josie. Wait, what now? Exhaustion and defeat weighed down Johnny's words. The corporal held out his hand, and in his palm was a harmonica. In over 100 years, you're the only person who ever gave freely instead of taking. You are already a great man. Giving freely to others is the foundation of true success. Loving freely is the path, and success lies in your heart. Johnny returned to Josie. That year they married. They went on to raise 4 children and 12 grandchildren. He did reach stardom. His greatest hits were accompanied by the haunting hum of a harmonica. He wrote songs about struggles and lost love, golden rings and golden hair, blue sky and blue eyes, blackberries and blackberry bushes. But his most potent song was about a soldier and the path home. So, what did you guys think? Did my story make you think differently about success? I have to tell you, this is the first short story that I have written. And I mean, my shortest book, I think, is 98,000 words. And this short story was around 3,400. So my first attempt. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening. Have you signed up for my newsletter? If not, there's a link in this Tea Talk. I really appreciate everyone joining me. And Kathy, thank you for coming. Happy Wednesday to you too, girl. I appreciate your support. I think you are the best. Thank you. Spill the Tea. A quick reminder, everyone. Next Spill the Tea book chat is June 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern, noon Central, 11 a.m. Mountain, and 10 Pacific. I will be spilling on Mind Games by Nora Roberts. Get my Vanna on. There we go. Mind Games by Nora Roberts, one of my all-time favorite authors. I have this signed book to give away, signed by Nora. I'm very excited. Plus, you get a chance to, plus one lucky winner will also win a copy of my book. Let's move it to the side. Somewhere in there, it gets in there. There it is. My book, Visions of Emerald, that I will sign myself. Well, that's it for me. As always, thank you for being a book-loving friend and chatting with me, reading my books. Your support means the world to me. I cannot thank you enough. You guys are the best. I'll put the kettle on for next time. Hugs. Bye for now, everybody.